Yo, looks like you just pulled something pretty reckless. Did you think you'd win?
No idea. I just knew that if I didn't do anything, Hikone would have died. It wouldn't have made sense if I had asked someone else to fight for me and hold back in order to avoid killing them.
Ha! So you're trying to act like you're a hero? You didn't think you'd be like Muguruma when he saved you as a brat, did you? Did you think you'd be able to emulate Kaname Tosen when he saved you when you were scared of death?
It's not like that. I just found out about Hikone's situation. And even then, I was only scratching the surface. I couldn't abandon a kid who doesn't even know what it's like to cry. And for some reason, I just felt like talking with you about it.
You went and got yourself cut in half for some reason? You've started to get desperate, haven't you? You looked up to the Soul Reapers, but you didn't know what to do. So you recklessly and irresponsibly became as ideal a Soul Reaper you could be. You kept struggling, trying to follow the manual the Soul Society prepared for you. And this is the result. Looks like you've finally gotten me to submit.
What?
I'm no White or no Zarashi, but I've got a little something that makes me unique. My nature is more shadowy than the other Asauchis. You looked up to the Soul Reapers and ended up getting it into your head that you wanted to be as Soul Reaper-like as possible. So a part of me took on that form, the form of reaping a life.
What?
I'm your shadow. When you yourself accepted both your surface and your underside, and the moment you followed your soul and put your life on the line, you accepted all of yourself. In other words, you made me yield. So I needed to ask whether you are finally determined to do that, and I made things work out so that we could have a talk.
Yeah. I'm sorry for misunderstanding you until now. I will offer it to you. My blood, and also my life.
A strong wind swept by, scattering the leaves of the large tree and making the windmill rotate more harshly.
And if you are my shadow, then please lend me your strength.
Kazeshini disappeared.
Life is not just living. By asking you to offer life, I am not asking you to die, and I am not asking you to kill. Life includes dying. And as for blood, that is the oil that keeps your life burning. It could be money, duty, pride, or even that thing you call fear. I don't care what it is. Just take it and add it to my blade.
Hisagi heard the voice from within him, and as the windmill stopped, the world became silent.
Controlling life, including both living and dying, is exactly what a Soul Reaper is, isn't it?
Kazeshini's power flowed into Hisagi. Not a power that increased spiritual pressure, but a power of comprehension towards all of Kazeshini as a concept. In that moment, Hisagi accepted his own shadow, whose way of being he hated until that point. Then the wind died, marking the end of the cycle of life.
You idiot! You talked a big game to the captain and then got killed right away. Stand up.
No. I think he's done for.
So he really couldn't do it.
No, he's not done yet.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, I'm looking forward to fighting you again.
Don't you think you're getting a little ahead of yourself?
Huh?
Hikone then realized a black chain was entangled around their arm. Hikone thought for a moment it was just a remnant of the chains he had broken earlier, but they were suddenly yanked backwards. When they turned around, Hisagi was standing there uninjured.
What? Huh? I'm sure I cut through you, Mr. Hisagi. Was that some sort of Kido illusion?
That was...
Before he could answer, he was cleaved in half again.
I'm sure I felt my sword go through you that time.
Watching Hisagi collapse, Hikone slashed through the chain wrapped around them and sent it flying. After confirming that it had fallen to the ground, the child turned to Kenpachi again.
Huh?
The chain was once again wrapped around them, and when they turned around, Hisagi was standing there unharmed. Even his clothes had regenerated. Though Hikone thought they were seeing some illusion, when they looked at those around him, everyone besides Kenpachi and Kyoraku seemed confused as well, especially NaNaNa, who looked at Hisagi's spiritual pressure pattern.
Nah, no way. This Soul Reaper is in a real precarious situation.
Oh, huh. That's strange.
Hikone simply cut through Hisagi again. They cut off both of Hisagi's arms as well, so he could no longer hold his Zanpakuto. Hisagi, of course, tried to put up some resistance, but he was no match for Hikone's speed, and his arms were severed before he could do a thing. Hikone turned to land a finishing blow, but both of Hisagi's arms had already returned.
Okay then.
Hikone raised their hand to Hisagi's chest and shot a Sero. It carved through Hisagi's chest, destroying his heart and soul chain. But Hisagi still did not go down. Though he slumped forward, when he slowly raised himself back up, the hole was gone. Even his uniform wasn't torn.
What is going on?
Try thinking of the answer for yourself. Lord Tokinada's not going to explain anything for you anymore.
Tokinada's spiritual pressure had already disappeared, and his voice was no longer coming through the speakers. Hisagi wasn't sure whether he had died of blood loss, he had fled the valley, or if Urahara had done something to him. But all that was certain was that the person who defined Hikone's world was no longer around.
Is this some kind of trick?
Hikone was unable to come up with an explanation for what was happening, and so they decided to keep killing Hisagi. Though Hisagi attempted to defend with Kazeshini, Hikone cut through both him and his blade, slashing him from the neck down, cutting him in half. Hikone then approached in order to decapitate him, and that was when they saw it. The bisected halves of Hisagi's body were connected by a jet-black chain, one for each of his wounds. Hearing the chains jangling, and as though a winch were pulling them together, Hisagi's severed sections were reeled back together, returning him to his original state.
What?
Unable to understand what they had seen, Hikone stopped moving, and didn't even notice the chains had once again wrapped around them.
Hey, Gigi, how long has that guy been a zombie?
No clue. That freak's not a zombie, though.
That ain't any high-speed regeneration. What is that?
He's not the only thing that's changed.
What does that mean?
The spiritual pressure in this place has been remade into something new.
I'm going to show it to you. What kind of world you're now in.
What world?
Yeah.
Please don't get the wrong idea. I simply have a request of you.
A request?
Please pray as a Soul Reaper, so that the child's world is blessed.
Seriously, why me? You couldn't have left this task to Mr. Urahara. I'm going to show you that world.
He looked at Aura as she burned away her life. Then he threw both of Kazeshini's blades.
Because all I can do is forge an understanding between two mutual cowards.
The two sickles spiraled as they rose above Hisagi's head. As the vortex shrunk with Hisagi at its center, the two ends of Kazeshini collided with each other and disappeared into a black maelstrom.
Bankai.
The chains condensed into one point in the air, and then they became a jet-black mass that burst open, becoming a wind of spiritual pressure that raged throughout the valley.
Fushino Kojo.
The wind died down, and Hisagi, whose blades had returned to his hands, stood in front of Hikone. Two chains extended from below him and twisted around each of his arms, connecting him firmly to the ground. Hikone extended their spiritual pressure perception all around. However, they didn't feel any spiritual pressure. The air itself had stilled, and the reishi in the Valley of Screams had become entirely stationary, as though time itself had stopped. However, that was only the case on the ground and atmosphere, as Aura was still able to extend her spiritual pressure to the sky, and Kenpachi's vortex could be felt just the same. Hikone decided to attack Hisagi instead of waiting to see what his Bankai did. They increased their speed and cut Hisagi in half once again, but Hisagi still remained unharmed. Hikone continued to cut away at Hisagi, but every time the blade passed through him, the wound was already healed by the time the blade finished cutting through, as though Hikone had never cut Hisagi at all. It seemed that the regeneration power earlier was a preliminary step toward the Bankai, and as part of the process of awakening his Bankai here, he had invoked regenerative powers through his chains. Chains once again wrapped around Hikone. Hikone attempted to tear them away, but was unable to do so. When they pulled, the chains would extend and continue to wind around them. In order to find where the chains were coming from, Hikone turned upward to where the chains led, and their entire body froze. High above Hisagi's head, at about the same height as the falling castle, was a jet-black sphere fixed in place, casting countless rays of black down to the ground. Hikone registered what the sphere was made of. Chains. The same chains that connected the blades of Kazeshini in its shikai were writhing and gathering to form the sphere. At the same time, Hikone realized that Hisagi hoisted the blade he'd been gripping, and countless chains shot from the sky like rain in a downpour, crashing into the ground. Thousands of chains anchored the sky and earth together, and a bundle of chains thicker than the others dangled around Hisagi like a gigantic tree stretching to the heavens, connecting the ground to the black sphere. The chains around Hisagi and Hikone twisted and combined into one chain, with each end twining around their necks as if they had been tied together by a double-sided noose. After losing most of its ability to float, the castle had started to gently fall. It had also started to transport to Karakura Town. Within the castle, Urahara was preoccupied with a task, but then he saw the black sphere and chains from through the window. He probed into the spiritual pressure while he continued to make progress on his work.
So that's Mr. Hisagi's Bankai then. Well now, that's a pretty nasty one.
Head Captain, what in the world is this?
I did think it was strange.
Huh?
At first glance, Lieutenant Hisagi's Kazeshini looks like two swords, doesn't it? But typically, there aren't Zanpakuto that come in a set of two. My Wakizashi Okyo is a Zanpakuto created by Ohana after the fact. And Ukitake said it was likely Mimihagi's influence that caused him to get two swords.
But Lieutenant Hisagi's Zanpakuto is... Oh, then Kazeshini's true form is...
Yes, I think it's likely. Kazeshini's true essence isn't a Zanpakuto in the shape of two sickles. It's a chain that connects them.
Though Hikone had been baffled by Hisagi's Bankai, they did not waver and continued to attack. The chains wrapped around them didn't restrict them or hurt them, but before Hisagi tried anything, Hikone attacked with a full-power Sero. Light encompassed Hisagi, but after it faded, he still stood there unscathed. Hikone then exteriorized their blute to take over Hisagi's nerves, but chains launched from Hisagi's fingers and warded off the assault. In which case, Hikone thought they needed to destroy the black sphere, and so they mowed through it using the sharp and narrow Sero. But the chains extended from the separated halves and pulled itself back together, just like Hisagi's body.
A Bankai that makes the user immortal? No, I'm sure that Lord Tokinada told me that was impossible.
Hikone attacked once again to find a weakness in the Bankai, but no matter what they did, Hisagi would not fall. They weren't even able to tear apart the chain that connected their necks. Hikone attempted to vacate the area, but after reaching a certain distance, multiple new chains would entangle them and force them back under the black sun.
What's going on? What's with this power? With a power like that, why aren't you trying to kill me?
At some point, Hikone's childlike smile had disappeared from their face.
Well, I can cut you.
Hisagi let go of the sickles in his hands. They sunk into the shadow of the earth and disappeared, at which point a new chain entwined itself around Hikone's arm and ran along their skin with incredible force, each link in the chain transforming into a narrow blade, abrading Hikone's skin like a chainsaw, burning it off. Hikone then noticed something. Their arm, which had just been shredded off, had returned to its original state. That was when Hikone noticed that they had both been given immortal bodies.
No way!
It would have been nice if I had a Bankai like Kurosaki's or Captain Hitsugaya's. Something that would defeat my enemies all flashy-like. But I guess I'm just not cut out for that kind of stuff. You see, I'm a pretty huge coward. I'm terrified of dying. And ever since I killed Captain Tosen, I can't help but be terrified of having to kill someone else. That might be why I wound up with this pain of a Bankai.
A Bankai was a reflection of its wielder's soul, and because of that, the form Hisagi's Bankai had taken was one of his fear inverted, a form of dread. If Kazeshini could attain a form that would reap lives in Shikai to keep the cycle of souls in the world moving, then his Bankai was a chain that could halt the flow of life to bring the world to stagnation. By connecting everything, it forbade death, forbade life, and bound even the reishi in the atmosphere through the black sun. Hence its name, Kazeshini, Death Wind. The cycle of the world would stop, ending all retrogression and evolution, imprisoning it in chains, a world with no boundary between life and death. possibly resembling how the world was before the Soul Society had been born.
So then you and I just can't die? What's the point of that?
Naturally, this isn't forever. If you keep cutting me, I will die at some point.
Why would you tell me that? In that case, I'll just keep attacking you until you die.
Yeah, I would die from it. But so would you.
Huh?
Hikone then realized that with each attempt to kill Hisagi, Hikone's own spiritual pressure had faintly decreased.
But why?
To confirm it, they cut off their own arm. Of course, it immediately regenerated, but they confirmed that a part of their spiritual pressure had gone through the chain to supply the regeneration. Hikone then unleashed a Sero at Hisagi. He instantly recovered, but as he did, Hikone felt a vast amount of their own spiritual pressure being absorbed. Their own pressure went through the chain and was stored in the Black Sun, as though the ball of chains was accumulating a vast amount of spiritual pressure to use for reverting whatever was injured or destroyed to their original states. Their lives had become shared, and the spiritual pressures of everyone connected to the Black Sun had become equalized. The more Hikone cut Hisagi, the more of their own spiritual pressure would be consumed as well to heal Hisagi, and vice versa if Hisagi cut Hikone. Hikone realized the Bankai's true nature. It was a system that could only be used when Hisagi's allies were around. If he were to cancel the Bankai chains once they were both at their weakest state, both of them would become mortal again, at which point Hisagi's allies, such as Kenpachi and Kyoraku, would kill their enemy for him. It would leave Hisagi close to death as well, but as a Soul Reaper that was something he was prepared for, as long as it guaranteed the enemy's defeat. As for other conditions Hikone could guess at, first, Hisagi's wounds from before activating the Bankai hadn't been healed, indicating the Black Sun was only returning things to how they were when the Bankai was activated. And second...
Mr. Hisagi, would you please release this ability?
You think I would?
But until you do, I'll torture you.
Well, I thought it would come to that.
I need to torture him, but how? How could I make Mr. Hisagi feel more pain than when I cut him in half and bisected his body? He just stood back up from those.
Tokinada would have been able to come up with many methods of torture, and mirthfully executed them all, but Hikone didn't know how. Tokinada had only ever instructed Hikone to eliminate, and so they had no clue how to torture someone on their own, and so all Hikone could do was lash out and continue to kill Hisagi.
I'm very sorry.
As they spoke, Hikone continued to kill Hisagi, and Hisagi put up no resistance.
I'm sorry.
Hikone punched, gouging through Hisagi's flesh, breaking his ribcage, easily rupturing internal organs. Though he immediately recovered, Hisagi would eventually be in agony. But regardless, Hisagi stood up again.
Please, forgive me.
If you're going to apologize, then just don't do it in the first place. It's not as if I'm some kind of masochist.
But I need to do it for Lord Tokinada.
So you're going to blame hurting me on Tokinada?
Huh?
Hikone stopped moving, and distress coursed over their face.
You understand that hurting someone who isn't even fighting back is a bad thing, right? See? You've got a sense of right and wrong in you. Hurting someone who isn't even putting up a fight isn't something you really want to do, is it? Or are you gonna put all the blame on Lord Tokinada and say it's for his sake to make yourself feel better?
No! Why would you say something so terrible? What should I do then?
Don't rely on someone else for every little thing. You can't assume everyone in the world is going to be kind to you.
But Lord Tokinada would have...
Hikone pulled a communication device from their clothes and called out to Tokinada, but there was no response.
But...
Hikone had gone pale and wore an expression like a child about to cry.
You aren't a villain, and you aren't a puppet that has to do whatever Tokinada tells you. You're somebody who can walk the path of your own soul.
Hisagi moved one of his fingers to manipulate a chain, and pulled a blade that resembled his shikai from the shadow on the ground.
If you can't fight someone who isn't putting up any resistance, then I'll fight you.
Huh?
There's a mountain of things I have to teach you. This will be your training. Nothing to worry about.
Hisagi thrust out Kazeshini.
Don't hesitate. If I were an enemy, you'd be dead right now because of your openings. When you fight an enemy, always keep half a step away from them. You never know what might happen.
Hikone couldn't understand Hisagi's words, and in order to prevent themselves from becoming any more confused, they rejected Hisagi's advice and swept away Kazeshini's blade.
Stop! Please stop talking!
They killed Hisagi again, but he regenerated and brought his blade up against Hikone's neck.
See? You would have been a goner right then. Aren't you supposed to be way stronger than me? You're full of openings.
No, this is wrong! I became strong so that I could be useful to Lord Tokinada!
You need to have more fear. That is what you are missing.
Hikone cut Hisagi down multiple times in a tantrum, and Hisagi endured the pain. He continued to thrust Kazeshini, but always stopped before reaching Hikone's throat, heart, eyes, and other vital spots. The scene resembled an adult Soul Reaper training an admiring child. As he remembered himself crying after being attacked by a hollow as a child, Hisagi allowed himself to be cut down countless times, while he continued to stop his blade before hitting Hikone, giving them pointers all the while. As this played out, the castle in the sky continued to fall, but Aura endured the agony as she held it afloat, and found satisfaction in watching Hisagi and Hikone. All Hisagi had supporting him was his pride as a Soul Reaper and his feet, which walked the path of justice that Kaname Tosen had shown him. And because of that, he walked that path with integrity and was capable of withstanding the repeated death, pain, and nihility that assaulted him. In a short time, Hisagi revived from over 100 deaths before Hikone's breathing became ragged and they fell to their knees. Their spiritual pressure had emptied to its lowest point. That meant so at Hisagi's, and yet Hisagi continued to stand.
This world is not kind. Just being alive is terrifying. That is exactly why you must be kind to everybody around you. And I will try to do that as well.
With Hikone almost unconscious, Hisagi glanced toward Kyoraku.
I'm going to release my Bankai. But don't kill Hikone when I do.
Huh? Do you really think that I'd be that heartless? Well, anyway, if I did do that, the young lady over there would probably stop holding back the castle.
Hisagi looked over and noticed the clouds surrounding the castle had begun to disappear, and that the disappearance was approaching the castle itself.
The teleportation's already gone so far.
Hisagi released Kazeshini's Bankai, and figured he would use a simple Hakufuku to put Hikone to sleep. However, the moment his Bankai was released, Hikone's Zanpakuto lit up, and Ikomikidomoe appeared from it and assaulted Hikone.
What?
Ikomikidomoe moved to tear Hikone's head off with his fangs, but Aura instantly appeared between them. As she had been directing all of her spiritual pressure towards the castle, she hadn't been able to fully turn herself into mist, and the side of her torso was gouged deeply as her body was flung to the side.
Aura!
Out of breath, Hisagi ran to where she had collapsed and held her. Meanwhile, Ikomikidomoe began to absorb the spiritual pressure around him and grow at a terrific pace.
I was so close to consuming all the fragments of Rayo, but right now, a small piece is enough.
When he separated from Hikone, he must have stolen some of the fragments of Rayo from them. He was absorbing the reishi in the atmosphere with an incomparable force, and condensed his ominous spiritual pressure as he stood before Hisagi and the others.
So this is a fragment of Rayo then? That's it! I remember it!
Even a small fragment of Rayo seemed to have weakened Osho's Zanpakuto ability, and his true name that had been overwritten had been regained. His spiritual pressure swelled with explosive force, and he diffused a far more pronounced hollow presence within the Valley of Screams.
Etch it into your flesh along with your despair. My true name is...
Jank no Zarashi.
Ikomikidomoe turned around, and the form of a demon filled his sight.
I'm not letting anybody take you from me.
Then a blow like a fierce god's came down on Ikomikidomoe. He was unable to say his true name, and all that was left of him was his faded sword form after Nozarashi crushed and dispersed most of the power from the fragment of Rayo.
The hell? Your name might as well have been Wimp.
Aura! Hang in there!
Though Nanao tried to use Kaido on her, Aura shook her head and held her wound with her hand as she stood up.
Don't mind me. You should treat Hikone.
She held Hikone in her arms. Having lost most of their spiritual pressure, Hikone slowly opened their eyes, looking dazed.
Miss Aura?
I'm fine. Please, Master Hikone, take your time and rest.
She left Hikone with Nanao and then turned her attention back to the sky. The teleportation had already reached the outer walls of the castle.
Hey, what are you planning?
There's something I need to do.
Apologies for the delay.
In the next moment, a gigantic garganta, one bigger than a Manos, opened at the lower end of the falling castle. As they saw the black fissure, all of them realized what Aura and Urahara's aim was.
I've already discussed what we would do in the event this occurred with President Vararo Berna. I've exhausted all of my tricks, and this is as big as I can make it right now.
A garganta isn't exactly supposed to be a garbage dump, but I suppose with the situation being what it is, we don't have any other options.
That's more than large enough.
Aura then subjugated the Kompaku in the air and attempted to leap into the sky.
Hey, are you just gonna leave?
I was able to hold Hikone in my arms for the first time. That was enough.
I see. Well, if that's how you feel, then all right.
Yes. Please do take care as well, Mr. Hisagi.
As Hisagi felt that Aura's smile was no longer mechanical, Hikone slowly reached out their hand from where they had collapsed.
Wait! Please wait!
Please. Stay in good health.
Before Hikone could say anything else, Aura had turned to mist. Through her handiwork, the shape of the castle in the sky changed, and it slowly disappeared into the fissure of the garganta. The clouds floating in the sky fully cleared. Hikone's hands still reached towards her, but eventually their yearning seemed to fade.
I wasn't able to fulfill the role Lord Tokinada gave me.
Yeah, you weren't.
I tried to kill Miss Aura for Lord Tokinada. I think that was right even now, to do it for Lord Tokinada.
Do you?
Why would Miss Aura have saved me?
Don't think about it too much. She did that because she wanted to. That's good enough, don't you think?
She did it because she wanted to? She didn't have a reason?
As Ikomikidomoe had stolen some of the Reo's fragments, Hikone's leftover spiritual pressure was about on Hisagi's level. Yet they were so emaciated they could not move.
I heard that Miss Aura is something like my mother.
Was she? Then no explanation is really necessary.
Do you think I'll actually be able to call Miss Aura mother someday? Do I even have the right to?
If you don't know, then I'll tell you. Having a reason or having the right to. These things don't matter when it comes to a mother fawning over her child.
The Soul Society. Tsunayashiro family main entrance.
I suppose when one lives for an extended period of time, things like this will occasionally happen.
Tokinada was in the deserted inner parlor of the Tsunayashiro family residence. He had used a small Tenkai Ketchi with coordinates set to this room in order to escape the Valley of Screams. Still, he had suffered severe wounds and left a trail of blood behind him as he slowly headed deeper into the residence.
Well, this was a good experience. I suppose even a group of cornered rats can kill a tiger. I still have many cards to play, but until I heal these wounds, I should hide for a while.
Tokinada opened the door to the chamber of the head of family, at which point he became bothered by a faint sense of anxiety. The air in the room was different than usual, and a chill ran through his body. Someone was in the room.
Is that you, ninth successor of the phone family? Or maybe Byakuya Kuchiki? How entertaining. It seems that I cannot survive this much entertainment, and I won't be making a comeback. Who are you? Don't you think it is somewhat impolite for you to step foot into the Tsunayashiro residence?
Oh yes, how rude of me.
You.
I could not find anyone around, so I mistook this place to be abandoned. My mistake.
Mayuri Kurotsuchi. You're the one who delivered Kyoraku and the others into the valley, aren't you? I thought you were more thoroughly occupied with that.
I've left that with a remote-controlled double. The person here with you right now may also be a double, but that makes no difference.
I doubt you came here under Kyoraku's instructions. Did you come to capture me? Or did you perhaps come to see if you could get one of the 4 great noble clans in your debt?
I don't see much use in making you indebted to me in your current situation. Then again, I would not have much interest in you even if you were in perfect health. But I was interested that the Tsunayashiro family that heads the 4 great noble clans went to some lengths to conduct an experiment to make a Soul King. Though the data from the surveillance bugs I attached to the corpse unit is only coming back now that the barrier around the Valley of Screams is breaking. Considering all this along with the data you left behind here, it seems that you really are an amateur with only superficial intelligence, Tokinada Tsunayashiro. Had you entrusted the plan to me from the start, I would have at least been able to rapidly perfect the Rayo's vessel.
But you didn't come here to say you'd help me realize my dream, did you?
The biggest obstacle in the way of increasing the perfection of the Soul King's vessel is the being Tokinada Tsunayashiro himself. Had you entrusted the matter with me, I would have immediately eliminated you, of course. As even if you were to boast about leaving it all to me for the sake of a greater cause, it would have been troublesome if you were to meddle according to your whims and indulgences.
That was quite harsh of you. However, there was no way I would have created Hikone for the sake of a greater good. There was no reason behind creating a Rayo other than for my own indulgences. If you've seen the Corpse Unit's data, you understand the depth of the Soul Society's crime that I spoke of. Do you not? The world was formed as a result of treachery and spite. There doesn't need to be any great cause in a world where the descendants of criminals fight for their wretched profits. The world should revolve and rot around our own amusements and desires, should it not?
It seems we do not see eye to eye. To use the crimes of the past as a reason to block change is just laziness.
It's always like that for Kisuke Urahara and you scientists. You talk extravagantly about making the world turn or creating something new, but no matter how you spin it, you are drowning in your own selfish thirst for knowledge, and you only amount to a servant of the world's profit.
Good grief, it would mean trouble for me if you were to speak so trivially of science. You are almost like a child throwing a fit.
Yes, I won't deny that. Tearing apart a bug crawling along the ground before my eyes and laughing at it is the same as using my influence in the world to achieve my gratification. There is no difference between you and me. We both dance atop the ants and occasionally find one that is powerful. That is all. Aren't that who you are, Mayuri Kurotsuchi? Now, what will you do? Will you join me? Or shall we kill each other? Or will you take me like the mob of others you dominate, bottling me up in order to make me suffer forever as an experimental subject? No matter what route you take, remember this. The man you see before your eyes is the very karma of the Soul Society!
I do not know what you are so angry about, but I only came here to observe your research. Well, regardless, I will apologize for entering this room without permission. And if I were to apologize for one other thing, it would be for not locking the door behind me.
Tokinada then felt an impact on his back. He had no time to feel the pain before realizing something cold just slid into his body.
What? Just...
Tokinada saw a blade jutting out from his abdomen. It wasn't even a shikai, just as simple as Sauchi. Mayuri hadn't moved a step, instead deciding to browse the bindings of books on the room's bookshelf, no longer holding the slightest interest in Tokinada.
Impossible? Who?
Tokinada's spine creaked as he turned around and found a young girl dressed in black.
Who are you?
At first, he thought it was Soifon, but then he noticed her clothes matched those of the assassins he himself had framed when he killed the Tsunayashiro main family.
I see. So, your commission has finally been filled then.
Commission? What are you talking about?
Seeing her grip her blade as though she didn't know any of the fundamentals of swordsmanship, Tokinada realized she was just a trainee and not a true assassin.
My parents' enemy. Tokinada Tsunayashiro. My whole family.
Your parents' enemy?
That's right. You killed everyone.
You're saying you've killed me? For something as small as that?
Something as small as that?
Rage overcame the girl as she stabbed Tokinada again and again. Mayuri continued to hold no interest in the tragedy happening behind him as he skimmed a book that had drawn his eye. The room became filled with the sounds of a blade hitting flesh and of pages turning. After stabbing Tokinada countless times, the assassin sank to the floor out of breath. However, Tokinada still stood.
So, are you done then?
Seeing him still stand, the girl's hatred was overtaken by fear, and she began to quiver. Tokinada straightened himself out, but blood began to flow from his mouth and the sound of something shredding echoed within him. Tokinada had arrived at death. He thought to fire out one last kido to kill the girl, but instead turned his eyes away from her.
I get it. So I die here. It was not Tosen who held a grudge for so long, but some insignificant nobody seeking revenge who has caused me to meet my doom. So this is how I will spend my final moments, after taking everything from the Tsunayashiro family and properly inheriting the karma of the Soul Society.
Mayuri silently lifted his eyes from his book as he listened to Tokinada's final words. The girl stood immobilized, overwhelmed by Tokinada's laughter.
See what happened, Shunsui Kyoraku. My life has come to an end here. That means a girl whose name I don't even know has defeated all of you. You couldn't even get to me. Finally, I've ruined your plans. How unfortunate, how deplorable. You sorry bass. Now you'll never be able to punish me. How about that, Tosen? Do you feel crushed? I will die without feeling even the slightest bit of regret for what I did to you. How about that, Shuhei Hisagi? How about that, Ginjo? How about that, Aura? Are you being killed by Hikone right now? Oh, even if you survive, you won't be able to lay a hand on my soul anymore.
Tokinada could no longer see as he slowly walked around aimlessly.
How about that, Ukitake? The man you tried to believe in is still going to die, and nothing will change.
He spurted up yet more blood and then collapsed against a wall.
How about that, Kakyo? The stars that you...
He came to a halt.
So it was the sentimentality of an inexperienced assassin, then.
After giving the quivering girl a glance, he slowly walked out of the room.
I see. It did not take much then to cut short the Soul Society's karma.
Mayuri simply ignored everything in the room as he had lost all interest whatsoever, and a short while later the girl in black ran from the room. Only the miserable corpse was left behind. It might have been intentional, or maybe he had truly forgotten, but he did not leave any final words for Hikone. Mook in prison.
So one of the flows has changed.
Aizen used his incomparable perception to verify Tokinada's soul had been extinguished. The past.
Is there anything you wish for, Kaname? I will give you a token of thanks for following me as my most loyal subject. If there is something that you wish for, you may tell me.
If you would allow it, I do have one wish.
Oh?
What I wish for is a warning against a sin. If I commit a betrayal and become able to accept the Soul Reaper's world, if this world that will never achieve evolution brings me peace, then at that moment, please wipe my existence from the world and leave no trace.
It is true that if you stop walking your path, you might forgive the Soul Reapers. However, don't you think that you could accept forgiving them?
If something could be absolute, then that would be only you, Lord Aizen. Even the one who taught me the way of justice was also a part of the world I despise.
I see. So the very origin of the justice that stirs you is also the linchpin that may destroy your great cause.
If I accept the Soul Reaper's world, that means that I have disavowed my cause. At that moment, the things that I have done wouldn't be justice. They would simply turn into slaughter. If I did that, then my friend Kakyo's death and way of being would be sullied. Not only would I be standing here after betraying her wishes, backtracking on my cause would be the same as killing her again.
But don't you think she would have forgiven you had she still been alive?
Yes, she likely would have. That is why, before I succumb to vice within her innate goodness now that she is no longer here, I would like the mercy of disappearing from this world.
Mercy, is it?
If my cause is a fraud, then I absolutely cannot be forgiven. Before my heart is filled with false salvation, please destroy the entirety of my Kanpaku. That is my wish.
Once I stand at the top and create the next world, what do you intend to do?
That new world cannot have a prisoner of revenge like me in it. Because of that, after you come to stand atop heaven, I will kill myself to purify your world.
It seems no matter what happens, I will lose my trusted retainer.
I'm very sorry. Please, forget everything I just said.
I don't mind. These are words that come from your heart.
What doesn't allow me to sever myself from the justice that my friend Kakyo extolled is my own inexperience.
I don't mind that either. Knowing one's own weakness is the foundation of climbing higher.
Aizen looked at the incomplete Hogyoku he held in his hand.
Since evolution occasionally requires fear, let me promise you that, before you suffer from the plight of forgiving the Soul Reapers, I will erase you with certainty.
The darkness in Muken quivered faintly.
Kaname, it seems that those who follow in the footsteps you left behind have walked a path to a place rather entertaining. Even if they are able to surpass that corpse in the end, I will wait with anticipation, looking forward to the time when their journey illuminates my own path.